Mark, I have a question, and I'm okay with you adding my voice message and your answer to a public YouTube video. My question is, what's the best way for people with Asperger's to manage their anxiety? Thank you, Ken.
Well, in answer to the question, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all or a cookie-cutter approach for anxiety, because what causes your anxiety might not cause anxiety for somebody else, and what alleviates your anxiety might not alleviate that anxiety in somebody else. So it's going to be a very individual approach to find out what works best for you. But let's make a distinction between fear and anxiety, because fear is something that you're afraid of, but you know exactly what it is. For example, let's say you hate going to the dentist and you've got to go to the dentist next week, and you know you're going to sit there and get a cavity worked on, and you kind of predict what's going to go on. You already know because you've been there and done it before. So yes, there's some apprehension there, but you know what's going to happen. Anxiety, though, is being afraid of something and you don't know what it is. You just know that you feel anxious, and the anxiety that's going on in the moment is not the event itself, because you don't even know what the event is. It's your self-talk. So we have to look at self-talk. So if the event actually manifests itself in your life, the one that you've been worrying about so much, that actual event will be way less emotionally painful than the worrying about that event prior to the actual occurrence. The actual event is not the source of your anxiety. It's the thinking about the event that is the source of your anxiety. Think of it like this. Let's say you're in college, you've got a big exam coming up, maybe it's the final, and it's super important that you get a good grade on this. And maybe you have some test anxiety, and so you engage in this if-then business. If I freeze up, then I might flunk this test. Or if it's harder than I think, and if I didn't study enough for this test, I may get a bad grade. And if I don't pass this exam, I may flunk the course. And if I flunk the course, I may have to take it again. And if I have to take the course again, then it's going to take longer for me to get my degree. And if it takes longer for me to get my degree, it's going to cost me more money. And if my parents are helping me financially, they may get upset with me for taking longer than expected. And so you get in this if-then loop, a bunch of what ifs, and that is the anxiety. Another example is there was a lady who had IBS symptoms, and it triggered her anxiety, and so her commute was particularly stressful. So she gets up and she starts having some stomach issues, and then she starts getting sucked into this if-then loop. If I have stomach troubles this morning, then I'm going to have anxiety on the way to work. And if I have anxiety on the way to work, then I'm going to have to stop at a gas station somewhere on an emergency basis. And if I do that, then I'm going to be late for work. And if I'm late for work, then I'm going to get a point. And if I get too many points, I'm going to get fired. And so you're down in this rabbit hole of what ifs. There again, that is the anxiety, not so much the drive to work in and of itself. So you get the point, right? The anxiety is the what-if business. It is the if-then loop that you get sucked into. So what we can do in that case is we can look for triggers to our anxiety and maybe even journal those. It wouldn't necessarily have to be a notebook. It could be one piece of paper. And so after you have an anxiety-provoking event and you're calm, you could write down, okay, what happened right before I got anxious? That is the trigger. And then you would also want to write down what was my self-talk during this anxiety-provoking event. So let's use an example of a husband on the autism spectrum, and his neurotypical wife is upset about something, and so she is asking a lot of questions. You know, maybe she's saying things like, why can't you ever blah, 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 or why do you always do such and such, or what were you thinking when you didn't follow through with blah, blah, blah. And so she's upset and she's kind of interrogating, and so that is the anxiety-provoking event. And then maybe your self-talk was, oh my God, here we go again, complain, complain, complain. I'm always in trouble. I didn't do anything wrong. Why is she treating me like a child? I feel so criticized. I have to defend myself. I have to prove that she is wrong, etc. So in this example, her complaints about the relationship not going right did download as a trigger for you, but it was the self-talk that exacerbated the anxiety. So what do we want to do? We want to begin the business of practicing different self-talk. So, using the example that I just illustrated where she is upset and she's kind of quizzing you, why can't you do this? Why do you always do that? Because she's frustrated and at her wit's end, and you're downloading that as nothing but criticism and put downs and shaming and blaming. So, what could you do differently next time in the way of self-talk? Here's some ideas. I could realize that she's quizzing me because the relationship is really important to her. Another thought could be, I'll stay and listen, and then I'll paraphrase back what I heard so I can understand her point. In other words, I'm going to listen to understand rather than listen to mount a defense. Another thought could be, I'll ask what I can do to help rather than just do some version of shutdown or meltdown. So we want to replace the negative self-talk that sets us up for the if-then loop with more positive, constructive, and realistic inner dialogue that is more representative of what might actually be going on. So in summary, the best anxiety reduction strategy for you will be for you to identify what types of self-talk you engage in when you're in the throes of a particular anxiety-producing event. And each event will trigger different self-talk. You want to look at those, and you want to begin the process of coming up with some deliberate replacements for the negative self-talk. So that's the key term, deliberate. You will have to start thinking deliberately when you're in the middle of the storm.